Joining me now to explain the history and the relevance of the Houthi rebels, Anthony King, Professor of Defence and Security Studies, University of Exeter's Strategy and Security Institute. Anthony, good to have you with us. I said this a little earlier to one of our guests, and it wasn't a cheap or a crass comment. The word Houthi sort of conjures up an image of sort of ninja-like freedom fighters who are there to protect their own soil and do the best for their people, etc. There's something cosy about that name. Many would argue, in reality, it could not be more the opposite to that this is a very militant, very extreme Islamist group who want to see the end of America, the end of Israel, and the end of goodness knows who else. These people mean business.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the group its origins are interesting. It emerged in the highlands of northwestern Yemen in the kind of 1980s as a sort of tribal Shia grouping, a political grouping underneath the original leader, Hassan al-Houthi, which is where the name comes from, and its current leader is that initial leader's brother. So that's where the name Houthi comes from. And essentially emerged as a political resistance movement against the Yemen Arabic Republic that was suppressing and discriminating against Shias in that area, the Shia sect of which they're part in that area. And it became then into very significant conflict with the Yemeni government, early 2000, 2004 to 2006, then participated very heavily in the Arab uprising and the displacement of the Yemeni government at that point, which then descended into the civil war, 2014, the 9-year civil war that we saw. And as a result of that, it's annexed a very significant part of northern Yemen, the area adjacent to the Red Sea. So essentially, the Houthis are a political Islamist political movement based on initially tribal and certainly religious affiliations, but a very self-conscious Islamist political organization. And indeed, its formal name, Ansar Allah, is party or partisans of Allah, of God, essentially. So, I mean, it's a very formal political organization, although based on initially kinship, ethnic, religious ties.
So essentially, this is born out, Anthony, of initially a domestic issue. Essentially, as you rightly say, they have the capital, the north of Yemen is kind of tied up. Essentially, they got what they wanted. Even the fracas, the war with Saudi Arabia, there is a, albeit tenuous, peace there between the two at the moment, and Saudi Arabia have been quite vocal in certainly wanting to keep it that way. But do they have wider plans? Because we know that just down the road, a place called Iran like to fuel the fire somewhat, and they would be somewhat perhaps enjoying this. After all, one of the mottos of the Houthis is death to Israel, death to America, death to the Jews, etc. So they're not beyond being influenced by Big Brother down the way there.
No, quite. I mean, 100% agree with you. I mean, the interesting thing and the most important thing, and where this situation has arisen from, is that as a Shia grouping in the Gulf region, over the last 10 years, especially in the course of the Yemeni civil war, the Houthi militia group, political party, became very much more closely associated with Iran, and especially with the Iranian Islamist Republican Guard Corps, and in fact Qasem Soleimani, their famous leader, who was assassinated by the US in 2020. So there is a very close alliance, partnership between Tehran and Sa'ad, between the Houthis and Iran. And there's different debates whether they're a proxy force, but that at certain points they might be called that, but they're certainly closely allied to Iran. So although they have their own political agenda, which is political autonomy and sovereignty in Yemen, or the area of Yemen that they control, they are now linked into a regional and international context, and they are linked into an Iranian arc of Shia hegemony across that Gulf, or aspired Shia hegemony across that Gulf. So they have independent own political agendas, but they are closely interrelated with Iran. And really, I think it's difficult not to see some of these actions as intimately related to a wider Iranian strategy.
I think, yes, that does seem rather inevitable at this point. Anthony, listen, we have hit the clock, but thank you for your time. I hope we speak again as this develops. Anthony King, Professor of Defence and Security Studies and Strategy at the Security Unit of University of Exeter.